Welcome to the Daily Horror Habit Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Krieger, bringing you daily reviews of current and classic horror movies for your twisted pleasure. Be aware that these reviews and discussions may include spoilers. And as always, I hope you enjoy.
In the early 30s, Adolf Hitler and his inner circle became obsessed with the occult. Nazi agents traveled the globe in search of ancient Nordic relics known as runestones. The symbols inscribed in these stones were said to describe the path to immortality.
In 1936, a stranger came to Town Creek.
We were told you were a historian.
On a quest for an ancient stone.
They were here, our ancestors, the Nordic gods.
That possessed the power of life.
Bring her here to me.
And death.
When you rule the blood, death is no longer the end.
What is it out there?
I was 12 when he came to our farm. He needed blood for the ritual, so he froze us in time like this.
He can't come into the house. There's a painting on the doors and the windows. Keep him out.
We had him contained until he came here. We're all going to pay for this now.
Just tell me how to kill him.
Once his third eye is released and cross over, nothing will be able to contain him, not even the runes.
Today's installment of Tubi Tuesday, in which I highlight a film currently streaming on Tubi TV, takes a look at the rural Nazi occult horror of Blood Creek, which blends Nazi zombie horror with a mostly single-location siege setting. Now, if I told you that Joel Schumacher directed and co-wrote a Nazi zombie siege film starring Henry Cavill, Michael Fassbender, and Dominic Purcell, is that something you might be interested in? Blood Creek is one of those early 2000s horror films that serves as an example of a director creatively branching out their filmography while scooping up talent who would explode within the next few years if they weren't already on that trajectory. And while Blood Creek isn't exactly a diamond in the rough film, it is an example of Tubi TV cultivating a collection of lesser-known horror films that actually provide some decent entertainment at just the cost of your time. Blood Creek is the tale of the Marshall brothers on the road to revenge. Henry Cavill stars as Evan, an EMT whose brother Victor, played by Dominic Purcell, suddenly went missing during a camping trip. But when Victor suddenly appears in Henry's trailer one night, heavily bearded and scarred, he convinces his younger brother to grab their guns and as much ammo as they can carry with the means of enacting revenge on the people who are holding him hostage. But once they arrive at a remote farmhouse covered in strange markings, Evan learns of the horrors Victor suffered from, and the horror that still resides within the property. There's a story beat early on about Evan and Victor's history, their father blaming Evan for allowing his brother to go missing, and Evan filling in as a surrogate father to Victor's kids that doesn't really go anywhere. This history lesson on Ethan includes a particularly absurd scene that serves no other purpose than to establish he's an EMT, which could have been summed up in the time it took you to listen to that sentence. In this scene, Evan is attempting to stabilize a man suffering from a gunshot wound, while the police, not 10 steps away from him, are in a standoff with a meth head who shot the man. One of the cops runs into the meth head's trailer and emerges shouting, "They're cooking meth in here," moments before the trailer explodes into a ball of flames. Very subtle stuff. It's a very action-heavy and completely unnecessary Schumacher moment that doesn't surprise me at its inclusion, but again, it serves no other purpose than that of spectacle. Fortunately, the film opens with the far more interesting aspect, that being the backstory of its antagonist, Dr. Richard Worth, played by Michael Fassbender. Back in 1936, a German family hosted a doctor who they learned specialized in Nazi occult studies. Dr. Worth has the ability to bring the dead back to life, but requires the power of a runestone on the family's property, as well as access to fresh human blood. You can probably see where this is headed. We learn that Victor was the latest of the doctor's victims, and he enlisted Evan along to kill the doctor and family who helped imprison him. Though this plan naturally goes to shit once the doctor is free and traps the brothers and the family within the confines of their farmhouse. And now for a brief intermission. If you've been enjoying this episode of Daily Horror Habit, please take a moment to subscribe to the show on your preferred streaming platform or leave us a review on iTunes. And thank you for your continued support, and I hope you enjoy the remainder of today's horrifying episode. As far as Nazi occult horror goes, Blood Creek is schlocky fun that often shows signs of some genuine creativity that makes it a somewhat memorable zombie flick. Wild and absurd, but creative and bloody enough that it leaves a mark. One such scene is when the Doctor uses his necromancy powers to raise a stable of dead horses, who he commands to throw themselves through the doors and windows of the farmhouse. Windows and doors which he cannot enter due to anti-Nazi necromancer spell that has been written on them. Okay, Blood Creek is a little more than absurd at times. But to be fair, I've never seen Henry Cavill and Dominic Purcell shoot the shit out of a Nazi horse that attempts to kick them to death in a kitchen before, so Blood Creek has that going for it. A very bloody and CGI heavy moment that is more comical than anything else, but then the film does transition to a more methodical approach to its horror moments, going for general unease rather than that of lunacy. The Doctor begins to use his powers to raise fallen humans, essentially an outside evil influencing the forces inside the home which he cannot enter. This leads to more traditional zombie moments as family members are forced to fight undead relatives who have been killed, but here's where Schumacher's penchant for excess actually shines. There are a handful of gruesomely bloody and excessive kills that are a standout amongst the film's overt narrative and character shortcomings, giving some life to this undead affair. The meaty wetness to every head that's bashed in and every shotgun blast is definitely noticeable and exceeds the film's rather straightforward presentation. Also, the more that we see of the Doctor in the moonlight reveals some gross and heavily scarred practical work that makes every scene he's in more or less grotesque. While it does provide some entertainment, Blood Creek ends with a setup for a sequel, which is absolutely preposterous way to end a horror film that never truly capitalizes on its promising alternative history premise. It's sometimes silly, bordering on absurdist, but Blood Creek does lend enough attention to making sure that each kill is memorable that it is a standout from the film's lackluster performance and narrative. Just don't expect this one to redefine the zombie genre. But what do I know? Maybe watching Michael Fassbender dressed as a rotting Nazi necromancer who rides an undead horse makes up for the film's other shortcomings for you. I don't judge. So if that sounds like something you have to see to believe, maybe consider checking out Blood Creek while it's streaming on Tubi TV. And that'll do it for another installment of Daily Horror Habits' ongoing Tubi Tuesday segment. I'll see you guys tomorrow for another Daily Horror movie review, and next Tuesday for another Tubi TV offering. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Daily Horror Habit on your preferred streaming service, and follow the show on Instagram at Daily Horror Habit and on Twitter at Daily Horror Pod for episode updates. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.